You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody. I bet you weren't expecting that, were you? First, thanks for coming back to the show. And today, for me, is a little bit nostalgic, as November the 9th, 2018, 5 years ago to the day, was the day I completed the Camino de Santiago with my beloved niece, Emma. It was a wonderful hike, and as both of us were going through divorces at the time, it was quite a poignant time for both of us. But we laughed, we had a few, let's say, sad moments, but most of all, that hike made me realise we were both going to survive our breakups, and the physicality and the sheer joy of such a hike really put me in the right frame of mind to go for my second Appalachian Trail thru-hike in 2019. So today I'm interviewing two guests, both of whom did a 2023 Camino. The first will be Beth Bakke Stenjhem, who I met on the TSX Challenge to Mount Whitney last year. Beth went for her second Camino this year and went on the one that Emma and I did, the Camino Francés. After Beth, we'll be speaking with Frank Levine, who I actually met on my 2019 AT thru-hike when he drove 2 hours to present me with a rain kilt he made specially for me. I still use it. Frank did the Portuguese Camino this year, which is a hike that my partner Dana and I intend to hike in 2025. So there really is some symmetry and good karma here this week. But to give you all your Appalachian Trail fix, between our dos Caminos, we're going to be speaking with Joanne Flagg from the southern terminus of the Appalachian Trail on Springer Mountain, Georgia, as she reached it last Thursday to conclude her thru-hike. Also, Jessica Lang-Wright catches us up with her progress as she pushes on to complete her thru-hike. We'll have to miss out on the Then the Hell Came section this week because it's quite a long show, but I'll be including it in next week's show. First up, here's my friend Beth Bakke Stenjhem, whom I love way too much. Here's Beth. We've got a friend of mine on the show today, although I do have a few issues pronouncing her name. She's just actually reminded what it is. This is Beth Bakke Stenjhem. Hey, Beth, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Steve.
And I suppose it was likely I was going to get it right, as you told me literally seconds before we started. So, Beth Bakke Stenjhem. Now, you and I met as fellow members of Team 6 on our TSX Challenge last August. I know you've been a listener to the show in the past. That was a really special week for all of us out there as we really came together as a team. Had you done a guided hike before?
Oh, gosh. No, I don't think I had. I hadn't. And I don't even, I think I heard about TSX Challenge on your podcast.
Right.
And I knew that I needed some guidance if I was ever going to do the John Muir Trail. And
Right.
So that's kind of, I thought, I'm just going to call and see if they happen to have anybody cancel. And so I kind of got in the last minute.
Right. Was that a planned thing that you wanted to do the John Muir Trail? So this was your shakedown hike for the John Muir?
Yeah. So I had originally wanted to do the John Muir Trail and then with some friends and talked to somebody who told me, you are not ready to do the John Muir Trail. You are not prepared.
Whoa, who
You
told
don't
you
know
that?
what you're doing."
Who told you that? That's a cheek.
But he was right. He was right. And so these friends of mine, we went on the Appalachian Trail for 2 weeks, starting in Georgia, just to
Right.
see if we could do something like that together. And we didn't know what we were doing. And so that was a much better place to learn what you shouldn't do and what you should know.
But don't you think being on a trail is a very humbling experience anyway, isn't it? You know,
Yes.
I'm not naturally, being British, of course, I'm not naturally a humble man, but being on a trail and learning how little you know it does do something for the psyche, doesn't it?
Right. It does. But it makes you feel empowered too. Empowered that you are able to do more than you thought you could do. And, yeah.
Well, you sent me a couple of stickers, I know, after the TSX Challenge, and I put them on various posts. It's around my computer now, and it's on a wall over there, and it says, "We can do hard things," which is one of the things, was one of your sayings when we're out there. And you were three of our fastest hikers. There was you, Karen, and David. And as people know on the show, I've already said this, but I'm going to say it again because you gave me my absolute best memory of the trip, working with all of us, at either a break or at the end of the day, getting up and cheering and shouting us in. It was almost embarrassing sometimes, thinking I'll be hiking terrible today, and applauding as if I just won the bloody gold medal. But it did encapsulate, though, to me, what it's like to hike as a team. It's something I hadn't expected. Was it unexpected for you, that sort of teamwork we got together?
Well, I've done some running with teams before. So there's something called the
is that a
Ragnar.
Ragnar?
Yeah, Ragnar Relay. And
A
it's
friend of
like
mine does
200
that.
miles, but there's 12 of you, or it can be 6, but we've always done it with 12. And you just get so excited when that person is coming in, and then the next person goes out, so that kind of teamwork where you think alone you can't do 200 miles of running, but together
Right.
you can do 200 miles of running. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a concept I'd never heard of. A friend of mine did a podcast on it. In fact, he's the one who introduced me to podcasting 7 years ago. So
Oh my gosh.
thanks to him for the Ragnar. And that epic finish that we did. I've done Katahdin at the end of an 80 hike, and at the end of a 2,000-mile hike, it's pretty darn special. But Whitney was right up there. What was your main feeling as you touched the summit?
I think I was nervous. I wanted so badly for all of us to finish. And I was nervous hoping that would happen, because I think at the time I thought, if all of us don't make it, I'll feel like we didn't make it, you know? So I was nervous and I was excited, to get up there, of course, and to see the beautiful scenery and stuff. But I was mostly nervous that everybody would make it, and everybody made it, and it was so exciting to see everybody make it.
And it was lovely, actually. I don't know whether you saw it the other day, but Chris put out an email, and there was a picture in the email. It was about TSX challenge. There was me and Karen hugging at the end, and I said, I got a few tears over it. Just seeing it, that moment, you get this feeling that someone just wants you to do this so well, and I can feel it right now, just going back to that time. But we're not actually here to talk about about Whitney or the TSX challenge. We're talking today about your recent hike with a few friends on the Le Francais hike on the Camino de Santiago. But it wasn't the first time you'd done the Camino, was it? Did you go with friends on that one, or did you hike it by yourself?
Yeah. So the first one I did was in 2019, and we did the Camino Francés, and from St. John, Pied de Port to France to Santiago. 500 miles.
Yeah.
And then in 2021, I did the Portuguese route, which was from Porto, Portugal to Santiago. That's only 250 miles.
I totally misunderstood that then. I didn't know you'd done the Porto one as well, because that's what Dana and I are going to do a year after next.
Great.
Yeah, the Porto one. Yeah, it's a shorter one, and the Porto one looks great as well. But I've actually had somebody else on to talk about the Portuguese one. So you did both of those. Yes. Okay.
And then this last summer did the Francis again from St. John. So.
And had you done any other long distance hiking before? Or was this the AT really the first longish hike that you'd done in preparation for the JMT?
For hiking in mountains, the Appalachian Trail, the Camino, that was in 2019. So that was the first thing I'd ever done like that. And it's different because, of course, you're not staying in tents and things like that. You're staying in hostels, and it's quite different than, hiking on a trail and having to bring your food and all that stuff, because you don't have to do that,
That's right, yeah. Stop at beer breaks and coffee breaks, can't you?
Yes.
Well, actually, mainly beer. In my case, it was mainly beer breaks. Well, you said, let's stop for coffee. We'd always say that, but we would immediately get a beer every single time. So what gave you the idea? Because, you're in your early 50s, I believe, and you just took up hiking in when you're late 40s, early 50s. What precipitated that?
So a friend of mine, her name was Jeannie. She did volunteer work for me where I worked at,
Mhm.
and she had told me about the movie The Way with Martin
Mhm.
Sheen,
Oh, right.
and so I watched it, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is an
Yeah.
amazing thing. And then, of course, I overdo everything, so I went and I read every book, every podcast about the Camino, like, totally researched it to death. And my friend Jeannie so wanted to go. She was not in any kind of shape to go, but she so wanted to do the Camino. Then in, I believe, 2018, she passed away when she had heart surgery.
Oh, gosh.
And I thought, why didn't we go and drive it? Why didn't
Mhm.
we go and drive it?
Sure, sure.
So it kind of just put me in the position to say, you know what? You can't wait. You can't wait.
No.
And so I asked my boss if I, could take off a month out of work. And
That must have been that must
unbelievably,
have been
she said,
that must have been
yes.
an interesting conversation.
It
Yeah.
was. It was. I said, I had already talked to my coworkers because I knew that was important they would take up the slack. And then I went to my boss and I just said, is there any way I could do this, without pay, take off a month? And
Sure.
I talked to her about the Camino and she said, tell me more. So I told her why and what it was about. And she said, go do it.
Alright,
Yeah.
cool. So what was your job? What were you doing?
I was actually working at North Dakota Assistive, helping people with disabilities who need assistive technology, something to
Alright.
make them be more independent in their homes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So the poor people had to suffer for a month of not getting anybody to help them. Is that right? Nice.
No, my coworkers did a
I know,
great
I
job
know.
without me.
So that was your first Camino. That was you say that was with anybody because your friend
So
had passed
yeah,
away?
so it ended up being, I mean, I just kind of put it out there to friends and stuff, and I had, well, there were 6 of us who started.
Mhm.
One of the one male that we had that was someone's son, he ended up leaving us at Burgos because he had to get back.
Right,
But the
right.
rest of us went on, and so it was the 5 of us women that ended up finishing and loved it
Nice.
and had a great time.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful thing to do. I think it was a great thing to do with people you love. I did it with my niece, and she was in her mid-40s. She's still my niece, though. She's my little
Yeah.
girl. So to do it with somebody you love was terrific. That's why it's great to be going, year after next with Dana. So let's get to this year. Why did you choose to do a second Camino of the same Camino? One, because there's so many different choices, aren't there?
There are so many different choices, and I really someday want to do the Primitivo. It's supposed to be really beautiful,
Mhm.
and that's from Oviedo to Santiago. So my sister-in-law called me and said, "I'd really like to do the Camino, and my friend Candy wants to do it. Would you go with us?" And I was like, "Okay,
Sure, why
sounds
not?
good to me." So, and then my sister decided to join us.
Hang on. So the poor assisted living people couldn't go,
Oh,
couldn't
so I've
get in for
I've
another month.
retired from that
Oh,
job.
right.
So now I have all kinds of time in the
Oh,
world.
right. Too much time on your hands.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so we just everybody made it happen, and we left in May, and yeah.
So when we spoke before, you said it helps you to be present. You never have a to-do list when you're on the trail. Is that what you find with hiking in general, or do you find that particularly in these Caminos?
In general, I just love just only focusing on what you absolutely have to do. There
Sure.
is no there never before the Camino, there had never been a time in my life that I remember where I did not have a to-do list, where I never
Wow.
got it done, and all you have to do is wake up and walk and find some place to eat and on the Camino, and then, find some place to sleep, wash your clothes out, yeah,
Good to
eat
go.
something, go to
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's funny. As you've listened to the podcast over the years, that's one of the things that struck me probably more than anything else about being on a long hike is this. You get into this feeling that life is so much simpler now.
Yeah.
There's nothing else you need to think about than just getting to either 8 miles, 10, 15, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then you eat. What's it? You wake up, you eat, you walk, you eat, you walk, you eat, you sleep. I mean, it's great.
Yeah.
Life doesn't get much simpler than that. So let's talk about the logistics. Where did you all fly to get to the south of France? And did you all go from the same place?
No, we were coming from 3 different places. My sister came from Kansas, my,
All right.
sister-in-law and her friend came from Fargo, and then I came from Bismarck. And, we met up, I think in Minneapolis, and flew to Paris, and then we took a flight to Biarritz, and then we
Right.
took a taxi to St. John.
Yeah. It's not that difficult, actually, is it? It's
No.
pretty straightforward thing to do. And did you need a visa? And the reason I ask is because I spoke with this other guest who talked about the Portuguese Camino, Frank Levine, and he said that he understood that there were new visa requirements coming into effect very soon in Portugal, probably because the Brits came out of the European Union, I suspect. Any problems with that in France for you?
Not right now, but I had heard that same thing. Maybe starting next summer, some kind of online kind of,
You
paperwork,
just got to
I
make
think.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. If you're planning any trip, you should really start thinking about what you need to do and get those things in place. But I'm terribly disorganized, so I normally pack on the day I'm going, so I'm not very good. So you got to Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, which is a cute little town, isn't it? Which is
It is.
pretty nice little place. Did you use a baggage service or did you wing it on the way?
So we on the first Camino, we had our bags with us all the time.
Right.
So we, had backpacks. On the last Camino, Candy and my sister sent their bags ahead. So they used they used a service every day. They'd
Right.
just text the people and they'd put money in an envelope and leave the bags where you were supposed to leave them, and then they'd be forward. And the first day, all of us actually over the Pyrenees sent our main backpacks ahead because it's such a hot. That first day is so
Good
hard.
move. I was going to ask you about that
The first Camino, we did not do that. But the last Camino, I said, we are all sending our bags ahead the first day because it is hard.
you can stop halfway. I think it's called Obispo Orison. That's right. Yeah. And I remember going past it thinking, this could be a mistake. we should have stopped it. We were 8 miles in. I was bloody exhausted at that time, and I thought, well, there's only about another 8 or 9 miles to go. Oh my gosh, that's quite a hike, isn't it?
Yes. So the problem with the Orison is that it's just such a small place that if you're going, if you plan way ahead, you can get a room or a bed, whatever,
Yeah.
a bed. But otherwise, I had checked into it because I thought, it would be nice to be able to stay there. And by the time we were going to go, it was full. So.
Yeah, well, I know if I want to do it again, I want to do it by myself as well. I think that'd be a rather nice thing to do by myself. I'm definitely not going to do the whole Pyrenees that first day because I remember thinking this is a bloody nightmare. I don't know what I was going to cope with at all. So did your friends feel similarly exhausted at the end of that first day? Because it's quite a ways down into Roncesvalles as well, isn't it?
Yes. And then it turned cold, and it was the end of May, so it shouldn't have been so cold. But on the way up, it was warm, but on the way down, because you still have a long ways down once you get to the top,
Sure.
it just got so cold and rainy and stuff. And so, it was a long day.
As soon as I got to the top, I remember it. I got to the top, and you start down this scrubby little path, and I bloody fell over in the first 100 yards on the way down. Oh, here we go. You know what I'm like. I shout out the number of fall it is, yeah. And and I did exactly that as well. Number 1, but first one on the way down. But at some stage, and I'm not sure from my notes actually when it was, you had a few issues with the team. Some people got sick and injured and so on. So tell us what happened.
So Candy, we were coming out of Logroño, and it was just a straight, it was not hilly or anything. And I think that she and my sister had gotten their poles all tangled, and Candy ended up falling so hard that she broke teeth. She broke her
my
nose.
gosh.
Yeah. Oh, it was horrible. We ended up calling an ambulance,
Wow.
which was hard because I don't speak much Spanish. And so I'm calling an ambulance
And they don't speak much English, do they?
and trying to tell them where we are, which is
Yeah.
just on some trail, and luckily there was a man who spoke Spanish, and he came over and he just took my phone away from me and told them where to come. So that was great. And so she went in, and her nose was broken and broken teeth and black eye. I mean, oh, it was I felt so bad for her. And then she was just looking good again. I mean, she just kept going. We took a day off and then and started again. And
Just a
then
day?
yeah,
Poor
yeah.
old Candy.
And she did. I know, I know. And then later, when we were coming down from Cruz de Ferro, which is very, very, very steep downhill,
Yes. Yes.
she fell again. And so she was just looking good. So 2 black eyes, she was bleeding all over.
Sorry, Candy, I
And
shouldn't laugh.
it was just, I just felt so bad for her. But the one thing that we got out of it, and I think especially Candy, was everyone wanted to help and everyone felt bad for her. And people would come up to her because you could tell. I mean, you could tell
Sure.
that she obviously had fallen and just were so
Or got beaten
kind.
up.
Oh my gosh. Like when she fell the second time, there was a man who stopped, and he was from Spain, and he just started pulling out like all kinds of stuff from his backpack,
Nice.
all kinds of,
Nice.
medical stuff, and put bandages on her and everything, and got her, all cleaned up. And he was just an angel. And the other really cool story was on that second time she fell, people were stopping and saying, are you okay? Do we need to call something? And whatever. And
Sure.
this woman who was from Germany stopped, and she was trying to convey a message to her, like, that she had fallen too or something. I don't speak German either.
Sure.
And then
Brits and Americans are the laziest people on earth when it comes to learning other languages. It's terrible, isn't it?
So this German lady was so, she cared so much. And so 2 or 3 days later, we come up across her again, and she just rushed to Candy, and she just hugged her as tight as anyone could hug anyone. And it didn't matter that they didn't speak the same language. It didn't matter that she didn't exactly know what she was saying. That compassion was universal.
Sure.
Yeah.
But Beth, you find that wherever you are on a hike, because people do want to support you and help you. That's why I shouldn't have been surprised when our team came together on the Whitney trip, because people always want to help each other.
Yeah.
I know when I fell pretty badly. I don't know whether you recall, everybody rushed to me. I felt like I was engulfed with people, which is great, because I was having trouble getting up again, But I found that in all the time I've hiked, that people will always reach out for you and want to help. Now, what about the meseta? A lot of people I know, people tell me that's boring. I want to just go straight through on a bus. I loved it personally. It was flat. It was high. It was about 2,500 feet, I think, higher, or maybe even higher than that, actually. But it was flat with wheat fields around some. Did you enjoy it, or did you find it quite tedious?
I loved the meseta. I loved it because it was, you really didn't have to think much about it. And, I live in North Dakota. That is where I live. I mean, is flat, is wheat fields.
Right.
I come from a farming background. So I loved the meseta. I just thought it was very peaceful. It was, I don't know. I loved it.
And what I loved about it most was the hidden towns almost. You'd be walking along, you wouldn't see a town ahead of you, and suddenly you're in the town. So you go down a little slope, you're in the town, you look around, you think, this is in the hole.
Or you'd see one way, way far off and think, when am I ever going to get there?
It was quite something. I love that as well. And you sent me 2 pictures today at Santiago. The first was of you and your late husband, Wayne, and your stepson, Andrew, at the cathedral. And then the second was just you this year. Yeah. I'd imagine that was quite a poignant moment for you.
Yeah. So when we finished the first time, Wayne and Andrew met us in Santiago,
Yeah.
which was just really, really kind of my husband to know how important that ending was to
Sure.
me.
Sure.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, this last time I knew when I finished, I was coming home to an empty house.
Mm. Yeah, I can see that. I can see how that must have
Yeah.
been. But kind of made light of it in the second picture of you by yourself because you said, "I was so glad to be done."
I was glad to be done. I mean, and the first time I was glad to be done too, just because it's a long way and it's a month, of walking, and so I have all kinds of respect for those of you who do the Appalachian Trail and
We're
do it for
crazy.
6 months, because even a month is a long time to be walking, and you have the comforts of a bed every night, so that's nice too.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, but I enjoyed being in a tent and now a hammock. I've done a bit of hammocking now as well, and I've enjoyed that as well. But I think this thing of managing your hike, wherever your hike is, wherever it is, whatever the parameters of that hike are, you still have to manage it, don't you? You had some horrendous management to do with poor old Candy, and in fact,
Yeah.
I think you also told me your sister got pneumonia, didn't
Yeah,
she?
my sister got pneumonia too, and so she spent a couple of days in Lyon and then caught up with us, took a bus and
Oh,
caught up
right.
with us, and that's the other kind of nice thing about the Camino is that, I mean, you can take a taxi if you are done for the day, and you just can't go any further, but your bags or if you have a booking or whatever, you can get to the next town with a taxi or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's pretty doable for people. And so, Janelle missed a couple of days and Candy ended up missing a couple of days, but, it was still doable. We only had so much time. We had, I think, 34 days and we finished
Oh,
in
right.
33.
Right.
So we had to make
Yeah.
that,
Keep
15
going.
miles
Yeah.
a day or whatever.
And how did she, as a sort of side issue, how did Candy negotiate or navigate the Spanish shell system?
Um, oh, so I mean, it's different than ours.
Yeah, yeah.
The first time when she went into the emergency room, like she was my sister and I didn't go with the ambulance, and so we walked to the hospital, which my sister was like, "Maybe we should take a taxi." I said, "We were gonna walk today anyway. We'll just walk, the 8 miles was 5 miles to the whatever, to the hospital." So we got there, and they hadn't even been seen yet by the time we got there. And, then she got seen, and then she was sent out to the emergency room, I mean, the waiting room again for a while, and then she got pulled in to do X-rays, and there was, like, this whole line of people waiting, like they brought them all down there together. It was very odd. And yeah, it was just a different experience.
But she got treated, so
She got
that was good.
treated and yeah,
That
they
was good.
said, you can, you don't need to stay overnight. You don't need to, stay here. So,
Cool.
yeah,
Good
we
night.
just, yeah.
Now, you've done this twice now. So can you, and I haven't warned you about any of this, by the way, can you offer a couple of tips to people who are thinking about their own Camino? And if you could offer those tips, what do you think you tell them? What did you think to yourself? Oh God, I wish I'd done that, or I'm glad I did that.
Because I am such a voracious reader and researcher,
Uh-huh.
I had really done a lot about, researching, I guess, for any hike, but, when I think about the Camino, I think some people think, well, I'll just walk, to get in shape. And I just think, fill your backpack with what you think you're going to bring and walk and walk and walk and walk and walk because you will bring less if you carry that backpack with 30 pounds in it.
Oh
you will
yeah,
you will know you don't need that,
yeah.
and that you will take less, and that's, I mean, with any hike, I think, because I
Were you
think
pretty good with
sometimes.
that from the beginning? Did you
Oh
did you
yeah.
work out pretty
Oh,
quickly what you need and what you didn't need?
I started using a backpack at the YMCA here in January. We didn't leave until June. I mean,
Oh wow.
like I am, I just thought, this is what I'll do. And then the other thing is, I mean, what I was told, when you're going to walk so many miles and so long and every day, to get a pair of shoes that are half a size to a size bigger. And I did
Definitely.
that, and I mean, I got lucky on all my hikes, my Camino. Uh, I've only gotten one small blister on the top of a foot, and that's it.
Nice. Nice.
So I'm careful about what socks I have, what shoes I have, that I've tried them out, that I use Glide for blister protection when I
Sure,
put my
sure.
socks on and stuff. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think sometimes people think, well, I'm in great shape. I'm a runner. I'm a whatever.
Yeah,
But
I never thought
carrying a
that.
backpack with weight in it
Oh,
is different than, and walking is different than running, or, doing yoga or whatever
yeah,
it is.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know what? It probably won't come as a shock to you as you listen to the show. I never put my backpack on
I know.
until the day I go. After I've packed it on the day I go. So, which actually explains why I've often left things out in the past and had to buy things on the way. But it's kind of the way it goes. So, are you to and done now, or are you now looking to find other trails? Because I know you're teaming up with a few other members from Team 6, aren't you? Again.
Yes, we are. We are getting together actually on the 26th or
Nice.
27th. And there's going to be, I think, 5 of us. And we're going to do the Three Sisters area in Oregon, because David's from there. And
Right.
he kind of got permits, and he's got the whole route thought out and stuff. And so, yeah, I'm so excited to see everybody. And
Yeah, I bet.
we had, there were a few of us, almost the same group, that went to the Grand Canyon with TSX Challenge
Yeah.
in March. And that was, oh my gosh, that was beautiful.
Absolutely doesn't attract me in the least. But I've told Chris that, by the way, so he knows. But tell me why I'm wrong. Because I think I did say to Chris, why am I wrong? Why am I wrong about that? It looks to me just a bloody great lot slog down, then a bloody great slog back up again. Or is it different to that?
Yeah, it was. It was, and it was snowing. I mean, and it was
my
like
gosh.
blizzarding when we left, and it was like icy on the top. And I thought,
Yeah, you're
what
really
are
selling
we
it.
doing? Like,
You're really selling it, Beth.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh. But we got down, and I because we had been with Chris before, I trusted him. I thought Chris would not take us down there if this is not going to all be
Totally
okay.
agree. Yeah.
And so we went down, and then there wasn't snow at the bottom, of course. And then we were, I think it was a total of 6 days maybe, or something like that. And so we were in the canyon for quite a few days, and then so
Nice.
one day in, one day out, and then the rest
Right.
were in the canyon, and it was great.
And was the vibe the same? Where you all sit around, sitting on your? Do you have to take your food, your bear canisters as well, and you sit on there? And everyone has to carry all the food at the beginning. Is that right?
We didn't need bear canisters, so it was a little bit lighter, which was nice. We just had these bags or whatever, but everybody took, their bags, and I thought of you many a time when I thought, I wish I had one of those dang camp chairs.
Oh dear! Don't you think that is the thing? I'm never going to go anywhere without that again.
I have one now, so I'm going to take
There
it
you
to
go.
Oregon.
Good for you. Yeah, good for you.
And Karen and I, who went on that trip, we really wanted to do the John Muir Trail this summer. We couldn't get a permit for it, and so we'll try next year.
I'm told by somebody the other day, we're kind of moving on a bit, obviously from the Camino, but that you can still go on the site, because you're meant to go on the site 6 months before to get the John Muir Trail permits. But apparently that people have got about 10 days or 14 days to take those permits up. If they don't take them up, they're released back to the public. So do you go back and check those as well?
I didn't, because for Karen, it was hard to get already to get around her work schedule.
Oh, of course,
so we were really limited to the amount of time, like when we could go and when we, had to have those permits. So we kind of just decided, we'll do something else instead.
Yeah. I forgot poor old Karen still works, doesn't she?
Yeah, I know, poor old Karen Stores. poor young Karen Stores.
Poor young Karen. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's why. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah. Well, look, Beth, it's lovely to see you, and lovely to talk with you about this trip. I think the Camino is wonderful. I'd love to do it again myself, and I appreciate you coming on the show. Tell us about it.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Cheers then.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye. I hadn't realised before I started editing Beth and Frank's conversations that both of them used a service to move their bags on. I think it sounds like a good idea, and one I may consider when I go with Dana. But to me, the downside is having to reach a target each night. I'm not sure how well that would work for us. But what about poor old Candy, eh? Oh my God, what a nightmare she had. She was a bit of a trooper though and got back on it. And Beth, who I learned when we hiked together, is such an empathetic and encouraging woman. She must have had that bittersweet moment when she finished, with her late husband not there to greet her as he had been previously. When Emma and I hiked in 2018, we spoke constantly about her late dad, my brother Dave, and the Camino seems perfect as a hike to think about others as you navigate the landscape. It isn't too onerous, but it keeps your attention as a hike while freeing you to think about things and people during your day. And I'll be hiking with Beth with some of the other members of our TSX Challenge next year as a kind of shakedown for my Southwest Coast Path hike in the UK in April, May and early June next year. We're going to be doing about 40 miles on the AT in late March and taking on the Virginia Triple Crown, so that's going to be a great little workout. So that's the Camino Francés. After our Muddy Blue Class of 23 catch-ups, we'll be hearing from Frank and his Portuguese Camino. Now, last Thursday, I was in Orlando with Dana at a conference for her work when I got a text from Joanne Flagg. I've been hoping to hear from her and had taken a microphone. Here's what happened.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, Joanne, congratulations.
Thank you.
How do you feel?
I fought back the tears all the way up here, and now I'm up here. I'm like, oh, I'm done.
Oh dear, it's strange. So talk us through that scrubby little path up Springer's Mountain, which I know is what it's like.
So unpredictable.
Talk us through that.
I'm like, oh, I hope I don't get recording with Steve and then end up blabbering all over the place. It'll come.
You know what? It doesn't matter, does it? It really doesn't matter.
Oh.
So tell us, how have the last few days been?
Good. It's cold. The weather, today ended up being a 17-mile day.
Right.
And then last night there was, I was going to stay at a shelter, but a woman at the hostel had told me that there was a homeless person there that was, fine and friendly, but I just didn't want to deal with the only hiker in that situation. So
sure.
It ended up being that way, but the trail's been lovely and the days have warmed up. So
how was Mountain Crossings and Blood Mountain?
That was great. I got my resupply there, and it's a fun little store. And I had I stayed at the bunkhouse there.
Oh, I've never stayed there. What's it like?
It's in the basement of one of the little side buildings, and it's very warm and cozy. Part of it has hardwood floors.
I do know where that is. Actually, no, I have stayed in it. I was thinking of the little cabins down the hill, but you weren't in one of those then.
Oh, no, I wasn't in the cabins. Nope.
Right. And what about Blood Mountain itself? I remember going up Blood Mountain northbound. Obviously, it was the beginning of my hike, and it seemed bloody endless. Trying to get to the top of the mountain. What was it like coming up the other way?
It's very, very gradual. So from the last parking lot, it's 4 miles, or maybe not the last parking lot, but pretty close. The last gap, it's 4 miles up, and I just said, Blood Mountain, here I am, and up I came. There's very little of it that was steep, and it was very pleasant. I made sure to stop and talk to a few people. I really tried not to hurry my day. In fact, yesterday I was coming up Blood Mountain and the rock ramps there, and the view was just gorgeous. I just sat there for a while, and I didn't know that it was so beautiful at the Blood Mountain shelter at the top with the rocks there. And I was just...
Whoa. I wouldn't have said it's that beautiful. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
It's oh, dear. It's a bit cold and messy. Oh, dear. I didn't
it
like
was
that at all.
cold, yes. But it was gorgeous. And so just soaking it all in. And then I did start early this morning, so I wouldn't have to be here too late. And just really trying not to rush and fighting back the emotions all the way through every little bit. They kept welling up, and now I'm done.
It's over.
I'm a thru-hiker.
Yeah, you are a thru-hiker. How about that? You're our third thru-hiker this year. Is that a good Is that a good feeling?
Yep. I'm happy.
Does it feel like it's one of those things that makes you want to do it again, or do something else of that similar nature again?
Yeah, similar. Not as long for me, I don't think. Not as
Really?
long.
Why is that?
There's
Is it
too
too far,
many
too
things
long away
to
from home?
do.
Oh, right. I see.
Yeah, just too many different things to do for me to want to spend this much time doing one activity.
Mm. But have you found it to be worthwhile, though?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that I did it.
What do you think it's taught you as
a few days to...
Has it taught you much as a hiker yourself? Have you become a different hiker, do you think, in any way? Or have your skills over the years developed?
I've only been hiking a short time. Before I did the AT, I only did one 3-nighter backpack trip.
Wow.
So I feel a lot more confident in, not all those little things you pick up along the way.
Sure.
It's just, yes, very different. Very different.
Yeah, that's a very accomplished thing too. So you've done one 3-nighter before this, which is actually 3 nights longer than I'd ever been on a trip.
Yep, you were brave.
My first hiking day was the approach trail.
That's amazing.
Oh dear! But, you've got the whole way. So, did you meet many other people along the way into today? Have you been taking your time to explain that this is it? This is the end of my thru hike.
Yes. Well, today was some section hikers, a few day hikers, and I just met Paddington going down. Her parents. I don't know if they met her up here or if they hiked up the last bit with her, but she finished her flip-flop today and she was heading back down to the parking lot with her parents. And
nice.
So that was just really fun and also emotional. And
I'm sure, it all is. It's I think that the trail brings all your emotions to the fore in a way that you sort of didn't expect them. And sometimes they're worse than others, sometimes they're better than others. But touching the sign itself, for a lot of people, isn't that moment. It's all those moments that are leading up to it normally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how were you when you touched the sign? How were you when you touched the sign?
I was emotional coming up to it, and then when I touched it was just total calm.
All right. I've done
total calm.
It's over. I'm ready for a shower. I'm ready for flush toilets.
I gotta call home. Maybe I'll go to Disney.
Yeah, dear. Well, funny enough, I'm there right now. I'm at Disney right now recording you. How about that?
Oh, awesome. Well, have some Disney fun for me.
So look, I'm not going to hold you up now. So what are you going to do now? Are you actually at the sign, or are you back at the shelter now? Because you have to go back a bit, about a couple of 100 yards, I think. That's the shelter.
Yeah. I'm sitting with the plaque, and I'm going to go back down to the shelter, and then I can come back up through here tomorrow again.
Are you going to go down the approach trail? Nobody's going to come pick you up at the bottom?
Yeah, down at the visitor center at Immokalee.
They can come in.
Yeah.
They can come in and meet you at the parking lot that you went through about an hour ago.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Well, that's the parking lot that everybody.
That's right.
Everybody.
They can pick you up there.
I was waiting for that parking lot, and then it didn't even connect. But no, I wanted to go down the approach trail to see what that's all about. Right.
But what that's all about
through the arch.
What's that all about, Joanne? It's 8 miles of wasted hiking. You don't need it. Well, look, I'm not going to hold you up, but I'm so glad we were able to talk within minutes. By the way, what time did you get there? It's now 5:39 p.m. What time did you get there?
5:10.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's been a delight talking to you, and I really appreciate you, doing this now as well. What I'd like to do is catch up with you in a couple of months when I'm sure your feelings towards it will have formed more, and we can just talk about about the hike in a more holistic way. Okay.
Yep. Sure.
Well, sleep well tonight. Satisfied that you won't have to be doing anything for the next 6 months.
Still going to be trying to stay warm.
Yeah, I'm sure you. Oh, yeah, sure you are. Yeah, stay warm tonight. And Oh, that was the thing. Did you stay warm? Because you were concerned about getting too cold in the last couple of weeks. How was it? Have you been struggling a bit?
I have stayed warm. I don't know how cold it's gotten, but I have been warm. It's been below freezing where I've been.
Wow.
I think, but yeah, I've been warm.
And you're going to bed in everything, I presume, all the clothes you got, your waterproofs and everything, are
you? Pretty close. Well, coming over Blood Mountain, the water was freezing in my water bottle.
Wow. Wow,
That's how
that is
cold it was on top of Blood Mountain.
Wow.
I had an inch of slush at the top of it.
And just one last thing, the finish itself, I know it's epic when you go the other way. Did it feel as epic to you, though, the fact that, because this was the end of your hike, so it is an epic finish wherever you finish, isn't it?
Yes, it is epic, but I really made the right choice for me in doing a flip-flop the way I did. Doing the hard part first and the familiar part first is my style, and then it's been a whole new adventure down here, and getting to meet so many Southerners and see the land and the trail down here has just been a great second half.
Wow, great. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that part of it, because it's I know for some people, once they've done the beauty of New Hampshire and Maine, some people say the rest of it's a bit ho hum, but I don't think it is at all. It's you still got to walk those walks and climb those hills, haven't you? There's still a hell of a lot of work to do to finish it, isn't there?
I think I would have been ticked if I had to do all that New Hampshire and Southern Maine when I was already so tired.
Well, look,
so this worked out good for me.
Sleep well tonight, knowing that you're a thru hiker, and we'll actually, I'll probably catch up with you next week some stage, just have a chat. But I'd like to record you again in a couple of months' time. Okay. Okay,
great, Steve.
All right,
enjoy your vacation.
Yeah, cheers then. All the best.
Bye-bye.
Bye. It was so great to be part of a finish, and to know that she was sitting by the plaque, having completed a thru hike and accomplishing what she set out to do all those months ago. The fact that she took a hiking break to Iceland is still mind-boggling to me. Well done, Joanne. And we will catch up with Joanne, Mary Marks and Mark Carpenter in a month or so as they all reflect on their accomplishment this year. Before we hear from Jessica, we should thank our awesome donors. This week, our monthly donors are Mike DiCello, Alan Troy, Jens Lippheide, Lisa Rana, Brian Helton Jr., Woody Bass, and Natisha Webb. Also, Shannon Ford made a generous donation, adding, "Thanks for all you do. If it wasn't for your show, I would never have heard Chris and experienced Whitney with my son." Oh, it's signed Mark Ford. It looks like Mark must have used Shannon's account. Glad that you could experience Whitney, Mark. It is such a blast, isn't it? Thanks to all of you who step up and keep us going. It is always appreciated and never taken for granted. Now let's catch up with Jessica. Here she is.
Hello.
Here we go again. How are you? All right?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, and we had a bit of a misfire just then because I made another technical hitch, but that's now sorted out. So before you tell us where you are right now, I know you had a couple of days with Betty, one of our other members of the class of 23. Tell us how that went and if it helped you.
It was amazing. I can't thank her enough. She ended up slack packing us for 2 days, which I was having problems with my Achilles tendon on my right leg. And I think that really helped, just taking the weight off, still getting some miles in, but not having to carry my full pack. I think that really helped.
It is a significant difference, isn't it, when you can leave your pack behind for a little while, just to sort of reset yourself. And the thing is that you get so many knocks and bangs and bruises and cuts and scrapes and injuries on this trip that one day one thing hurts and then the next day another entire different part of your body hurts, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And with the way the trail has been in Vermont with the leaves covering things, it's definitely been making things very challenging.
Have you fallen because of that?
I have not. I have come close, but I have not.
Frankly, any day that went without a fall for me was a result, as far as I was concerned. But I've got your notes you've sent me, which is great. So you got back on trail after Betty's, and you said you got to camp in the ski shack on Bromley, which had heat and electricity. There's a wonderful combination.
It sure was. Apparently, because of an agreement with the National Forest, since it's still on National Forest land, they're sort of required to leave it open as an emergency place as much as anything. But they apparently welcome hikers to stay in there. So we got to stay in there one night, which was really nice because, 4 walls and a roof when you're used to 3 walls and a roof is kind of an upgrade,
Yeah, and
And
heat,
it had diesel
electricity.
electricity. Yeah,
Wow.
we could charge our stuff and all that. So it was
Wow.
really cool. And it's such a beautiful view up there.
And you said that you went over Stratton, which is a great mountain, by the way. I loved it there. And you said it reminded you of the Smokies. In what way?
Well, the day we went over, it was that kind of windy, blustery, kind of raining, kind of not sort of thing that happens in the Smokies, and kind of that smoke that's famous in the Smokies with the clouds of blowing through and whatnot. I didn't even go up the tower because it was so overcast. There wasn't going to be any view. But when we got to the top, it was that kind of swirling wind and fog thing that you just totally encounter down there all the time. So it really reminded me of that.
So how are you finding this? You're now getting it. You've had cold, you've had wet, you've had real hot weather as well. But you're now getting. We're talking now on the November the 8th. So you're getting some pretty cold weather, and this is only going to get worse, I presume. Or are you finding this is something you can cope with in terms of the weather?
Well, I've been having a hard time. People who have been listening all season know that I run on the cold side. So I have now officially gotten back the negative 20-degree sleeping bag.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And how does that feel? Are you now comfortable again at night?
Well, I just got it, so I haven't been out in it yet.
Oh, right.
Yeah, thanks to my long-suffering husband. So, yeah, hopefully that's going to solve the problems because we have definitely had the cold. The one night we climbed out of Bennington after basically a snowstorm went through, and we ended up hiking in 2 to 3 inches of snow.
Oh, jeez.
And that was covering the leaves, which were covering the mud. So our shoes got soaked, and then it went down to 26 degrees, and our shoes froze overnight.
Oh, dear me.
Yeah, and I spent most of the night shivering. So, it was time to get back the winter, quote unquote, sleeping bag.
Well, there comes a moment, where you just can't put up with it. The feeling of cold. And once you start shaking throughout your body, it's tough to get over that, isn't it? So you really need to make sure you're warm at night. That allows you to rest, and once you can rest, you can then hike better the next day, I presume.
Yeah.
And you actually got back and did a slack pack. You did a 20-mile day. That's your first 20-mile day? I didn't realize that.
Yeah, we had done a 19-mile day back in Virginia, but that was the first time we've done 20 miles in one day.
Oh, schoolboy error. You shouldn't have stopped at 19. You should have gone on to 20 to get it out of the way.
Well, it's one of those things where, you start where you start and you end where you end. So.
How did it feel? How did 20 miles feel?
It felt pretty good. I mean, that day, again, was pretty darn cold. It was the day that we went over Glastonbury. That was also the day after we had kind of gotten rescued. We had 2 days of 40 degrees and rain. We ended up zeroing in a shelter again.
Oh God!
The second day,
you should have zeroed in the ski shack, which had the heat and electricity.
Yeah, I know. If it had been available, believe me, we would have. But we were further along at that point, so we had zeroed in the shelter because it was 40 degrees and raining, and that's prime time hypothermia weather. The second day, it was supposed to clear up. It didn't, and just starting to pack up in the morning, I just was freezing. So I ended up calling my parents, and my dad has been chomping at the bit to help in any way he could. But unfortunately, my dad does not use a smartphone, and he has an old-fashioned GPS unit. All right. Yeah, and he couldn't figure out how to put coordinates into it instead of an address. So we were having a real hard time trying to get him to the point where he could find us because the closest thing was a Forest Service road.
Right.
So ended up calling my husband. My husband ended up driving out to get us. He got us into Bennington.
Right.
And then the next day, my dad got up at 4 a.m. and drove up to Bennington and got us back to the trail. And we were able to do that 20-mile slack pack. And
Wow.
a trail angel picked us up and got us back to the hotel that night.
So you didn't miss out. You didn't miss out any miles. They took you back to where you'd been picked up.
Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you've made it to Massachusetts now. And by the way, you just mentioned going up Glastonbury, going over Glastonbury rather. I don't talk about this one much because I not that many people mention it, but it reminds me that when I went down Glastonbury, going northbound, I found that horrendously difficult and quite dangerous because I must have gone down in rain or something. Was it quite a steep climb going up it?
I don't remember it being that bad, but I was slack packing, so I didn't have
always
the
helps.
full pack.
Yes,
Yeah. So.
Right. So you made it. So you made it to Massachusetts, and you've now been over Greylock as well, but on a cold but dry day, which must have been nice for you. So what? Tell people what it's like at the top of Greylock. It's like nothing, no other part of the trail, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I had been up there before, and the first time I went up there, it was so foggy that you could stand next to the monument and not see it. So it was nice to actually see it this time.
Yeah.
So there's a big war memorial up there that they light up at night, and we were actually able to see that from the shelter that we stayed at the night that we climbed it.
Nice.
But yeah, it's pretty wide open. Unfortunately, the tower wasn't open, which is the second time I've been up there and the tower wasn't open because, of course, we're a little off season. But you can kind of walk around up there, and I was able to see Mount Monadnock in New Hampshire, which is the second most climbed mountain in the world.
Good
I
Lord.
don't know if most
Really?
people know that.
Really?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
First is Fuji, second is Monadnock, which is kind of interesting. I was also able to see Mount Sunapee in New Hampshire, and kind of my first baby thru-hike, if you will, was the 50-mile Monadnock Sunapee Greenway a few years ago. So that was kind of cool to be able to see that. And then you can also see into New York. And I'm originally from New York, so being able to see my kind of current home versus my former home was pretty cool. And to know that, of course, we're headed towards New York now because we're going southbound was pretty neat.
It's one of the many things that you kind of forget about hiking. You know, you get to the top and you see these views that one wouldn't necessarily see in normal situations. And that particular place, going up Greylock, it really feels like you get rewarded for that climb to the top because it's lovely at the top there, isn't it?
Yeah, and even not being able to go up in the tower, I mean, there are some things that are obscured by the trees nearby, but you can get a pretty decent view. It wasn't super clear when we were up there, but we were still able to see fairly far away. And
your last note here was you're about to cross I-90 at a spot I've driven over for over a decade. That must be pretty cool to know where you are and on the landscape that you've actually been through before. I suppose when you drove beneath it, you probably looked up and thought of yourself being on the AT, didn't you?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually like the bridge thing that goes over is labeled Appalachian Trail. So I've been driving underneath this thing probably hundreds of times when I've been going back and forth between where I live in New Hampshire and where my folks live in New York. And the thought of maybe someday walking over that in a thru-hike has always crossed my mind. So today I'm going to get to do that.
So that's quite a moment then. So have you worked out how many miles you've got to go? Because I know you're now on a bit of a time crunch, aren't you? So where are you in the state of your hike right now, do you think?
I think we've got about 530 to go.
Right. In what period of time do you want to get done? Or do you expect to get done?
We're hoping to be done by mid-December.
Wow, you're going to push then. I mean, it's still some good miles, but you've got easier terrain than you've done already. Now, I think I've hesitated to ask you this in the past because I know you've had lots of issues this year with what's gone on with your hike and so on. But Are you enjoying this right now? Is this feeling that this awesome task is just 500 miles to the end, which I know 500 miles is 500 miles a long way, but it's an easier 500 miles than the last 500 miles you've done, for example. How are you? Are you enjoying it?
Hard to say. I think I'm really focused on getting it done at this point.
Right.
There are definitely some spots that have been really cool, like the top of Greylock.
Sure.
There's definitely some things I'm looking forward to. I've been hearing about Sage's Ravine for years.
Yeah.
I didn't get to walk into New Hampshire really because of the way we flipped. So I'm really looking forward to walking into New York.
Yeah.
Because that's, where I was born and raised and stayed for the first 22 years of my life. So there are definitely still things I'm looking forward to. It's the snow the other day. That was really a challenge that tested me for sure. And then it's a matter of the good old New England saying there's no bad weather, there's only bad gear. So I've got the gear now, and hopefully that'll make things easier to deal with.
Yes, I'm sure. Well, look, I want to know if you're still kind of enjoying it, and when you look back on this hike, you're gonna have lots of thoughts and memories. But I can almost guarantee you, most of the memories will be the times you had a good time. It's just one of those things. It's tough to sometimes accept that when you're in the middle of either a snowstorm or a shitstorm going on around you, and so those times will pass, and the memory of what you're achieving here will stick with you, and those enjoyable times, when you get to the top of Greylock and you stay at Betty's and things like that, you'll think of the highlights as opposed to the lowlights. You might give the lowlights a bit of time, but you'll think to yourself, it was worth it. I'm a through hiker, so I'd just go with that if I were you.
I also have to say, the people have just been amazing, and they continue to be amazing. Yeah. We had some help from a guy whose Instagram is Hiker Church just yesterday. He was in the area. He pinged Mike on Instagram, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to resupply. And the next thing you know, he's like, I can give you a ride. And so we hung out with him for a little bit. He got us into the grocery store and out. And, the people continue to be the thing that really, as cliche as it sounds, reminds you that there is good in humanity and all of those things that all people say all the time. So, that kind of trail magic is still going on, even though we're a little bit off of the normal hiking season.
off the beaten track,
a lot of it off. Yeah.
You see others?
That's still happening. It's amazing.
It is amazing, and it is wonderful reaffirmation of the human spirit. Are you still? Are you seeing others? Are there many people hiking these days, or do you often go days without seeing people?
Well, I was actually going to say that it was kind of funny on Greylock how quiet it actually was because the road is closed. You can drive up to the top of Greylock if people don't know. Yeah. I think the road is closed this time of year, but we still saw a bunch of day hikers. But in a way, it was weirdly quiet. As far as hikers go, backpacking people, we've seen very few. There's one guy we talked to the other day. It was we were passing through Cheshire and Dalton area. But most people are smart enough to be indoors in New England at this time of year.
Okay, well look, you keep on trucking. You're still doing it. You're our last surviving member, so you're still going.
I hear I'm the last woman standing.
You are the last woman standing, and once again, the women generally have outperformed the men. So good for you. And we'll speak to you next week. Okay.
All right, sounds good.
Cheers, Jessica. Enjoy your day. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, she's getting there. It's been a struggle, and several of you have helped her on her way. Actually, if any of you want to help slap pack her or just bring her Snickers on the trail, let me know and I'll pass on your info. Now, back to the Camino. This time we have Frank Levine sharing his story of his family's hike on the Portuguese Camino this year. Here's Frank. Our guest today is somebody who drove an hour or so, maybe more actually, in 2019, just to deliver a rain kit that he made for me. This is Frank Levine. Hey, Frank, how are you?
Hey, Steve.
Well, I've got to say that kit still works. That kilt still works and has accompanied me ever since. You made it yourself, didn't you?
I did. I was in a little bit of a make-your-own gear phase at the time.
Right. It was great. It totally worked. But of course, you're not here today to talk about my dress sense, or in fact, my lack of it. You're here to talk about a hike I want to do in 2025 with my partner, Dana. You've just come back from the Santiago de Compostela, having hiked the Portuguese Camino. How was it?
Well, that's a loaded question. So 34 days, it was great. And you can't have every day in a 34-day hike be perfect. So I would say most of it was awesome, and there was a couple of struggling days.
Struggle's okay. We're there to struggle from time to time, and part of the joy, I think, of most days of hiking is to go to sleep at night, and just as you fall asleep, thinking, well, that wasn't that bad after all, and then you want to get up the next day, don't you?
Yeah, there were definitely some days where I think there was one day where I fell asleep thinking, I'm glad that day's over. And that maybe that the next day is going to be a better day. Yeah. But, it's a long trail. It's 400 miles. There's a lot of different varied terrain. We were hiking in June and July, so we had to deal with heat. There were unexpected challenges due to dietary restrictions and arthritis that we had to kind of work through. So overall, I think it was great. I had a blast, and I don't think you could really, as you've said with other people, like you can't really plan for one of these long hikes. You just kind of have to get out there and do it, and adjust as you move on.
Yeah, I think hike management is something I've been thinking about a lot recently, especially as my class of 2023. Some of them have been managing their hikes better than others, and they've done really well with to still keep going, and they've been able to keep going, even though there are times they thought they might finish. But in your case, you went with your family. Are they hikers?
So my son is a hiker. He's an Eagle Scout. And he's 19 now, but over the years in Scouts, he's hiked several hundred miles, 2 treks to Philmont, which is a Boy Scout backpacking camp down in New Mexico.
Sure.
We've hiked a couple hundred miles on the Appalachian Trail, which is nearby where we live in the Mid-Atlantic. My wife, on the other hand, is not a hiker. And and I would say she's not a hiker. Like, she can walk, but the idea of traditional backpacking to her is, and by traditional backpacking, I'll just be upfront, hiking all day, not getting a shower, eating dehydrated, crunchy food, pooping in the woods, and sleeping in a tent. All of those things sound like her worst nightmare. And so when we were looking at planning this trip, I wanted to do a long hike, and I would be perfectly fine going out and doing something like the Appalachian Trail because I don't mind the rest of the creature comforts that you're missing. But it wasn't really until we found out about the Camino and the fact that you could still have your long days of walking, but after your long day of walking, you get a shower and a bed.
Maybe it might be a shower and a questionable shower, but because there's all sorts of things floating around on the floor there. But you can trade up all the time, can't you? Though you can go to a better place every night if you particularly want to. But you can also do this incredibly cheaply, can't you?
You can. That wasn't our objective. We booked through a company called Camino Ways, and there's a couple of Camino companies out there that will do this for you. But basically, they set up our hotels for us, and they set up our luggage transfers. So what we had was we had to carry day packs, but we had suitcases that would follow us from hotel to hotel. And then they basically booked all the hotels, and my wife was like, well, we're going to do this. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. So we did the Superior Lodging, which was interesting because in some places the lodging was just outstanding. So for instance, skipping ahead a little bit, there's a city in Spain called Bayona on the coast. And we stayed at the Parador Hotel, which was in the middle of this medieval fortress, and it was awesome.
Yeah, they're great.
So
the Paradors.
Yeah, the Parador was great. On the other hand, sometimes what the superior lodging gets you is the best room in the only hotel in town. So, and that's more the southern section. The
well,
Porto,
superior, to be fair, is a relative term, so that's okay. It's not an unreasonable thing, is it?
It is.
I'm interested in this, the booking thing, and I know this will appeal to some people where they have a combination of somebody who wants to hike and somebody who doesn't necessarily want to hike and rough it in the backpacking way. But before we ask you about that, your son, you went on the AT with your son. Did he buy into that type of lifestyle?
Oh, you mean the roughing it?
Oh yeah,
yeah. He's a little. I would say he's fine doing that.
Right, okay.
And I don't know that he enjoys it as much as I do, but
Right.
he's perfectly okay with it.
He was there because Dad was there. That's fine. That's all,
pretty much.
That's all good. So you booked with this company, and it kind of, I wonder whether that was a good choice, or did it take away some of the spontaneity, or was it the only way in which you get your wife to go?
So I don't. Let's see here. So that would be, I'm going to say that's a complicated answer.
Okay.
So part of that would be that I think that when you're hiking as a group of 3, being able to wing it with your accommodations is a little bit tougher.
Yes, sure.
You know, I've been on the Facebook pages for the Portuguese Camino and the French Camino this year, and there's a lot of cases where people are finding that all of the rooms are booked up as they're coming into town. You know, my wife, this isn't, I don't want this to sound like this was just like being accommodating to my wife. Like, everybody has different preferences. And I met a lot of other people on the Camino who had exactly the same issues that she has, which is that she wanted at night, she wanted to have her own room and her own bathroom. So she didn't want to be sharing bathrooms and sharing bedrooms.
Yes.
And I think that if you're that type of hiker, then the certainty that you're going to be able to get those rooms is nice if you book with one of these companies. You pay a little bit more.
Sure.
Now the downside is that, and certainly when we talk about it a little bit more, the downside is that your itinerary is set. You can't really adjust to how your body's feeling, or you can't find yourself in a cool town and decide that you want to stay an extra day.
Yeah.
Basically, once you pay, you're going to be staying in those hotels. And so that really affected our hike, especially in the beginning, because the lodging that they were able to get us in the southern section of the trail, so that would be Lisbon to Porto. That's broadly what I'll call the southern section. Yeah. The towns are pretty far apart. And so you're talking 30 to 32K, or for American listeners, 20 miles between towns. Yeah. And when you're talking about hiking in June and July, it's hot. And there were definitely days where we would have much rather hiked, 10 to 15 miles and stopped. And we could have if we were booking ourselves, but we had hotels at the next town. So our strategy for that was, especially in the southern section, which was not as, I would say, picturesque as from Porto to the end, was we just utilized Uber and Bolt and sometimes the local cab.
Oh, was Uber quite available out there, even in the southern section as well?
So Uber was available in the major cities. However, between the major cities, it was a challenge. We had one experience where an Uber driver took our ride and then immediately canceled us. And then we were able to secure a ride with a competitor to Uber, which is called Bolt in Portugal. Right. And that driver told us that we were out of the service area, but he saw that we needed a ride and figured that we were in trouble, so he came and picked us up. So we definitely appreciated that. Yes. But some of those early mistakes on, having our rides canceled on us led to some changes in how we managed these long days where we knew we just weren't going to hike 20 miles that day. Sure. We would call a cab or an Uber from our hotel, which was in the city, and then we would take it halfway to the next town, and then we would walk to the next town. So we wouldn't put ourselves in a situation where we were going to be in the middle of nowhere and not have a ride and not be able to get a ride.
Do you know what? That's a really great answer to that question, because it struck me when we spoke before. That wouldn't be how I would like to do it, but the fact that you had three of you, as you say, all with different paces and so on, you have to manage it in that way. So I can see why that would be you would have to do it that way. It wouldn't be for me, because as a one person, I would have just struggled to get 20 miles, or I might have actually gone on to the next town. No, I couldn't do it that way. No, I think I would have tried. Wouldn't have booked through a booking company, because I hate the idea of having to be at a certain place at a certain time. But I entirely understand why you did. Why this Camino though, as opposed to some of the others? Because on the Le Francais one, which is the one I did in 2018, there's a lot more spaces. You can go to loads and loads of different towns on the way. Did you consider doing that one? Because you said you did a 400-mile hike anyway. Le Francais is a 487-mile hike.
Right. So the why the Portugal Camino, I guess, goes back to our first shakedown. Mm-hmm. So when we decided that we were going to do this, or when we progressed from the idea that we might do this to, I think we're actually going to do this in the summer of 2023.
Right.
One of the first things that my wife said is she said, I think we should go do a small section of a Camino just to make sure that this is something that we actually want to do. And nice. We did it during the fall of 2022 while my son was in school. So it was just the two of us. And my wife is very good at finding discount airfares. And she was looking online one day and she found really good flights from Washington, D.C. to Porto.
Right.
She knew that the Camino went through Porto and said, hey, let's hike a section from Porto. And so when we did that, we hiked the coastal section from Porto. We hiked from Porto to Vigo along the coast. And
how far was that?
I want to say 80 miles or so.
Oh, right. So a significant amount of the trail then.
Yeah. But it's a gorgeous section. It's right along the Atlantic coast. There's a lot more services as far as, cafes and restaurants and cool towns and
sure.
All of it was cool. The weather itself wasn't great. We have some kind of funny inside jokes in our family about one of the worst days ever hiking from that trip. But overall it was great. Go on then,
tell us.
Oh, okay, fine. So there was one of the days. So there was a storm in the Atlantic. And we were hiking up the coast, and we made what I would say on, I think, the third day, we made what I would say is a really bad decision. Tactical error. And we had a choice of staying a little bit inland, maybe a kilometer inland and walking through the village,
sure.
or going out to the boardwalks and walking up the coast.
Right.
And I don't know why we chose to walk up the coast, but we did. And about, I don't know, an hour into it, you're looking out at the ocean, and all of a sudden the horizon disappeared, which it means like rain, right? The rain is coming.
Oh, yeah,
and so we got all of our rain gear on, my homemade rain kilt, the whole 9 yards, and it just dumped on us. And I just remember my wife looking at me and kind of saying, what about this do you like? Because I have this way of just kind of smiling through pain. It's just my nature. I like to smile through pain and suffering.
Bet that pissed her off.
Oh my God, that is not the right thing to do in that moment. And I had to really think about it. And I'm like, you know what? I really don't like anything about this right now. So at the end of that, we took the first road that we could inland. We went to a restaurant and dried off, and then took a cab to our next place and called it a day. But that whole "what about this do you like" is a little bit of an inside joke in our family now. For this sucks, and we're just moving on.
Exactly. Do you know? But that's a valuable thing. It's a great thing to have happened. You didn't die. No one got badly hurt. It was okay. And now you can laugh about it. I think that's one of the great things about those crappy days hiking. You're always going to look back on it and thinking, oh my God, wasn't that weather terrible? And when you're 80 years old, you'll be looking at each other thinking, oh my gosh, wasn't that terrible?
Yeah.
And it probably get even worse in your mind.
I always say that the worst days make the best stories.
Absolutely.
And definitely that's a story day.
Yes. And was that a valuable shakedown for you, though? I mean, quite apart from that. Oh,
my goodness. Yes, that was a really valuable shakedown.
So what did you learn?
The biggest thing that we learned is that my wife needed to, that she couldn't, she has an arthritic toe. And does she know that or not already? She knew that, but I'm not sure that that either of us really understood the impact of it.
Okay.
And so one of the things is that her feet hurt the whole time on that one. And so one of the things that we did in the intervening time was, visit the podiatrist, try to work through custom orthotics. She went through a ton of different shoes, trying to figure out like which ones would be the right ones for her. She ended up making kind of her own Frankenstein insole out of a Superfeet insoles and a steel plate in the front of the foot to minimize the toe flexion.
Wow.
But for comparison, on the first day of our October hike, basically like she could almost take no more steps at the end of the day. It was 50,000 steps. It was about 18-ish miles. And I think that was everything. Like, I don't think she basically got into the hotel and just fell over and said on the bed and said, I'm done.
Right. Yeah.
That exact same section that we did this year, she walked right up to the hotel and said, my feet are talking to me, but nothing like last time. So wow. All of so when you ask, was that a valuable shakedown? I would say absolutely, because, I'm not sure we could have finished if we had just flown over there and started hiking without really understanding like how to take care of her feet. Because an arthritic toe I don't have an arthritic toe. So it's hard for me to kind of, I don't want to say empathize, but really understand what it feels like. But certainly that October experience helped both me and her to understand a little bit better about how we needed to deal with that.
So when you went this time, this year, you went all the way back to Lisbon.
Yes.
In retrospect, would you do the same again? Because you told me when we spoke before that you didn't actually enjoy the Lisbon to Porto area that much, did you?
Well, between our talks, I went back and reread my journal, and I have very mixed feelings on Lisbon to Porto. There were a lot of very interesting towns and interesting sort of sites along the way, but they were interspersed with some pretty unpleasant hiking. And by unpleasant hiking, I'm thinking long stretches of agricultural land without shade, road walks on busy roads.
Lovely.
And more than that, I would say it was a lack of the Camino style, for lack of a better word, services that you find certainly on the Francés and on the later sections of the Portuguese Camino, which is where you get these little Camino cafes that are just like roadside cafes where you can stop. They've got shade, they've got water. You can go buy yourself a beer or some wine. You can kind of rest and things like that. Versus in that section from Lisbon to Porto, that type of business, there's not enough pilgrims in that section to really warrant those types of businesses. And so you kind of have to just deal with the local cafes, which is fine, but it was a little bit more, I don't know. It wasn't, you didn't get the Camino feel really for me until you got to Porto. But I wouldn't say I wouldn't do it. I would do it if I were going to do that section again. I would do it by myself so that I could go at my own pace, and I would, do the things that I wanted to do, and not necessarily be trying to worry about is everybody else having a good time and things like that, because it's not as pleasant. It's just not.
I must say, as our conversation that we had last time, when we spoke about this before a few weeks ago, a week ago or so, I think I've decided in my mind, I think I'm only going to do Porto to Compostela, Santiago to Compostela, because I think because I hadn't realised how long it was from Lisbon to Santiago. How long is it from Porto to Santiago?
I wish I had that mileage with me.
I mean, ballpark.
So if the whole thing is 400 miles, I think that Lisbon to Porto is a little more than half. So let's say 160 to 180 is what Porto to the end would be. It's still a significant hike.
Yeah, that's a proper number, and that's fine. I think that'd be, and I think I want it to be the sort of thing that we'd like to do. We'd like to do as a couple, and I think that'd be a nice thing to do. So when I did the Le Francais route, I found very little English spoken in the villages we went through. Was language a problem for you guys or not?
Yes, a little bit. In the bigger cities, you could usually find people who spoke English. In fact, most of the people in cafes and stuff like that could speak English. I personally am a fan of learning in whatever language in whatever country you're in, how to, in their language, say, I don't speak your language. Do you speak mine? So, I could walk into a cafe and I could say, eu não falo português, você fala inglês. And they would either say yes in English or they would say no. And if they said no, then we could use Google Translate.
Yes.
And if they said yes, then we were fine. And usually they would say, un pouquinho, which means like a little bit. And then I would say, okay, well, I speak a little bit of Portuguese, and then we would pantomime our way through, and it was fine. My Portuguese got better over the time that we were there.
Cool.
Strategy that I used was at cafes and restaurants, when I did find a good English speaking server, I would ask them whatever the current thing I was struggling with. So little things like, can I pay with a credit card? Can I have the bill? Restaurant interactions. I would ask them, like, what's the right way to say this in Portuguese?
Nice.
And then when I got to Spain, I had to relearn all of that in Spain because it's weird, because when on the coastal Portuguese, you cross the river in a water taxi, and so you end in a town called Caminos in Portugal, and then you take a water taxi across the river to Spain, and it's like all of a sudden all of the words that you knew are gone. It's all Spanish. And in our case, we were met by a couple of, I'm going to say, 60-year-old guys with kind of large bellies and Speedos, just like yelling Galicia, Galicia on the beach as our water taxi came onto the beach, which was a little bit of it was an interesting introduction to Spain.
Funny. So I know there are a couple of options in Portugal. There is a coastal route, and you mentioned going up the coastal route, much to your wife's dismay. Mm-hmm. There's an inland route as well, isn't there?
Yes.
Which is that a choice, or do you go in and out?
Well, it depends. I think if you're winging it and you're booking yourself, there are opportunities to do part of the coast and then transfer over to the central, or there's opportunities to do what's called to go to the central and then transfer back to the coast.
Sure.
There's unlike the Appalachian Trail, where you just follow all the white blazes, the Portuguese is more of a network of trails, and so there's a couple of different options. I've not done the central, and the central really is from Porto. You would go inland through a whole set of towns that I don't know their name, and you end up in Spain in a town called Tui, and then you join up with the coastal route again. They kind of merge back together in a town called Rodondela. And so it's kind of taking the straight line of a triangle or two sides of the triangle. Sure. The two sides of the triangle would be your coastal route.
Sure.
And obviously even with the What About This Do You Like Day, we liked the coastal route enough last time in October to want to do that section again.
Yes.
And I'm glad we did.
That's what I was thinking, actually, because you could have got an entirely different session, couldn't you? But you actually chose the same thing. And certainly that's in my mind at the moment. I love the idea of being on the coast. I'm doing a coastal walk next year in England. So the fact that I'll be doing a coastal walk in Spain as well is pretty cool. Were there any visa requirements for foreigners, or is it just easy enough to get in and get out again?
So I think this is going to be dated information. I don't think so. Right now, there were no visa requirements. Basically, you could show up with a passport, fly in, we flew direct to Lisbon, and they just stamp your passport and off you go.
Right.
I have heard that the EU is instituting a visa requirement now, and I don't know what it is. It's probably worth investigating to find out exactly.
Probably to keep the Brits out, I should think, because they're no longer in Europe.
Yeah, you Brits are the problem.
Yeah,
no,
always.
but right now, like the last two times we went, it was easy. As long as you have a passport, you could go. I think that there is something that is either recently happened or is upcoming where you need, and it's not a lot of lead time. I think it's like 3 days.
All right,
but
that's not a problem.
It's not terribly difficult. And then once you're in, it's no big deal. And then, one of the weird things that we found from, and maybe this is just us being Americans, was the whole crossing from Portugal into Spain. Like, there was nobody there. There's no border crossing or anything, right? It's just like crossing a river.
Kind of fat guys in their 60s, as you were saying, in their Speedos shouting out Galicia, Galicia.
Exactly.
Excellent.
It was just a little bit weird.
Yeah. And the diet thing, because you mentioned before that your wife, either she's got gluten intolerance or she's got celiac disease, one of the two. She can't eat gluten. How did she manage? Oh, blimey. How did she manage that out there then?
So it's actually not as bad as you would think, especially from Porto north. From Porto north, it was pretty easy. You could usually find gluten-free, dairy-free. The southern section was a little bit challenging, primarily because the cafes in Portugal, they don't really serve gluten-free, dairy-free food,
right?
And they don't even sometimes. And this isn't a knock on the Portuguese. Like, sometimes they don't even, like, they didn't know necessarily what did and didn't have gluten. So, my wife had a Google Translate, a kind of a pre-translated Google Translate message,
right?
Kind of what she could and couldn't eat, and she kept on having to add. She kept on having to add to that so she could say, like, one of the common misconceptions was that potatoes have gluten. Well, they don't.
No.
But there was one server who was just insistent that she couldn't eat the potato dish because the potatoes were the problem, and she's like, no, it's okay. So for that, Google Translate actually worked really well. I would say if you have food restrictions, and they're serious, that you shouldn't mess around with it. Get something like pre-translated in the language that they'll understand, so you don't have to pantomime your way through it, so that they can just read it. And what my wife did is, she basically, at any restaurant, she would show them her phone, and the message basically said, I can't eat gluten, I can't eat dairy, I don't want to be difficult. What
I'm
is
American.
the easiest? Well, what is the easiest thing? What's the easiest thing to make on the menu, or what are the safest things for me, or the ones that need the least amount of modification?
Good idea. Yeah, good idea.
And I think this is just something that people with food allergies, especially people with food allergies, kind of have to contend with, is they don't want to be seen as difficult, right? But it's not good when she eats gluten. So, it's abdominal pain, and it'll take her out of a commission for a day if it happens. So, you have to balance, like, making sure that you're serious about it, but also not being like a prima donna at the restaurant, trying to be really nice about it.
It's important for some people. I know my ex had celiac disease, and it could knock her out for 4 days. So it was horrendous for her. Was it satisfying to get to Santiago in the end, particularly as you'd had to not compromise your hike, but you'd had to change it around a bit. You didn't do the full mileage all the time. Did you still feel satisfied? Have you scratched your itch of a long distance hike?
Have I scratched my itch for the long distance hike? I would say yes. But,
or is it just encourage you to go for another one?
Yes, a little bit of yes, and a little bit more yes. So it definitely scratched my itch for a long distance hike. Right. I think it, I personally found, and you said compromise your hike, but I view, and maybe this comes from my days as being a scoutmaster, and one of the trainings that I took as a scoutmaster, but when you think about Appalachian Trail thru hikers or people who are hiking solo, right, that is an individual sport. So when you're hiking with, in my case, like a group of scouts or my family, you have to really think about it as a team sport.
Sure.
Right. It doesn't make any sense. Like I said earlier, I'm the type who probably would have died from heat stroke trying to finish those 20-mile days if I were on my own, because I'm just stubborn like that. But I also the whole purpose of this hike for me wasn't necessarily to take every step along the Camino. It was to take a blowout vacation with my family before my son goes off to college, because this is the year between his high school and college.
Right.
And so I had to really think about this. And believe me, Steve, there was some, I don't want to say soul searching, but a lot of thinking about it as I'm hiking, about why are we here? Right? Are we here so that we can walk every mile, or are we here so that we can accomplish this thing together as a family? And if we're trying to accomplish this as a family, like what do we need to do to make that happen so that we're all still want to be a family when we're done? right?
Do you know what? I think that's a great mindset explanation. And I think you have to get in that mindset though at some stage in your life when you realize that you're right, it's a team sport. You want everybody to succeed and get there in the end, don't you? And all of you got to Santiago. So it worked. So that was perfect. Did you actually get to see was it called the Botafumeiro in action?
I did. I got to see it. My wife and son did not get to see it, unfortunately, because this is me being stubborn again. They don't publish when it's going to happen anymore, and so the first mass that we went to on the Friday afternoon, it was not there. Friday night we were hanging out in the hotel room, and it was about 15 minutes before the Friday night mass. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go try it again. Anybody else want to come with me? And they're like, I've had my religion for the day. And I think that was my son's quote was, I've had my religion for the day. So I just went and I kind of let myself in the back and watched. And sure enough, that's the one where they did it. And then,
awesome.
and then we tried again the next day. And of course there was no Botafumeiro. So I thought it was cool. I wish that there was a way for pilgrims to get a little bit more certainty about when it's going to happen. Cause it is a cool sort of culmination of your Camino experience.
We knew it was going to be the Pilgrim's Mass. We got there on a Friday, and it was the Pilgrim's Mass on Saturday morning.
Yeah, they've changed it around how they do it, so it's no longer guaranteed except for I think 11 specific holidays. But or if a group is going to pay for it, but they don't tell you ahead of time. There's just these are very minor nits. Like I didn't hike 400 miles so that I could watch the Botafumeiro. It was a cool finish, but I hiked 400 miles because I wanted to have the experience.
Yeah, sure. Is your wife one and done, or do you think this is because that sounds like a great holiday the way you've put it together? And if you're going to buy into the company taking your stuff, which is very, very available out there, isn't it? As opposed to because you don't have to take any tents or sleeping, but you need a sleeping bag in a lot of the places, but you don't actually need to take a tent or anything like that. Is this? Can you see her doing something like this again?
So I actually asked her that question, and she said that she would probably not do something of the length that we did this time,
right? But
she would consider doing Porto de Santiago again.
Oh, nice, interesting.
And that's still a 2.5 week hike.
Yeah.
So I really think that for her and even for me, there's a huge difference between that southern section, Lisbon to Porto, and Porto to Santiago. I really felt like we were more of that there was more of that Camino spirit, Camino community.
Sure.
Farther north, and it's no fault of Lisbon to Porto, and in fact, what that section of trail needs is more pilgrims to go hike it, right? Because as you get more pilgrims, then you'll get more
infrastructure,
of the Camino spirit, and more of the infrastructure.
Yeah.
But we hardly saw any pilgrims in the first half basically. And then all of a sudden it was like, now we're on the Camino when we came out of Porto.
Sure. And have you got any ambitions to do any longer hikes?
Oh, Steve, I have lots of ambitions. I don't know if I have the capability to do it, but I would love to do a long section on the Appalachian Trail.
Right.
I would love to do some sections on the Pacific Crest Trail. In the universe of long hikes, those are probably the two that I'd like to do. I'd like to do. I believe there's a hike in the UK. There's Hadrian's Wall, right? You can do that. That would be cool.
I was due to do that after my West Highland Way last year, but I went with a friend of mine. So instead of taking 5 or 6 days, we sauntered. I took 9 days, so I didn't have time to do the Hadrian's Wall again.
So I mean, I would do that. I might actually get my wife to do that one with me because she really likes she really likes everything kind of English.
Nice.
And then I'm going to be doing the Lost Coast Trail out in California later this fall. Got a permit for that. That's not in the grand scheme of things, that's not a long hike. I think it's 24 miles.
Yes, I've heard. It looks beautiful. We had somebody on the show who actually did it. I don't know if you recall, a long time ago. One of our early ones.
It's a sporty hike though. You have to dodge tides and rattlesnakes and ticks and poison oak, and nice. So it's what it makes up for in distance. It adds in danger.
Well, look, I appreciate you coming on and telling us about the Portuguese Camino. You kept in touch, and I saw your pictures. It looked like a great hike. It's seeing your pictures and talking to you now and talking to you the other day has encouraged me even more to want to do this. So I appreciate that. So the only thing I need to say to you now is buen camino.
Bon camino.
Okay, buddy. Take it easy, okay?
Thanks,
Cheers.
Steve.
Bye. Actually, Frank hadn't finished. He wanted to shout out to some friends he met out there. So I pressed record again. Well, I'm back on with Frank. he wanted to talk about his German friends. So come on, Frank, talk about your German friends.
Okay, so real quick, the one of the things about a long hike that I was looking forward to was the community, right? Getting to meet other hikers, and I felt like that was missing in the early section, as we kind of talked about, because we were one of the only pilgrims out there. And I would say that when we crossed into Spain, especially, that changed. We ended up through a interesting set of circumstances, basically walking with a couple of German women. So there was one of them turned out to live in Miami, and she's a German language teacher, and the other one is from Munich, and she's a police officer. And they didn't know each other before they started the Camino. Nice. They were just doing from Porto. And I don't know when exactly they had met up, but obviously, if you both speak the same language, then you're going to tend to group up a little bit. But so we ended up walking with these two, and out of on our day into Agarda, which is the first town that you come into in Spain. And I would say that we really hit it off. And this was the first time that we'd really spent any time like talking to other pilgrims, like while we were walking. Sometimes, as you know, sometimes your paces just don't line up, or your attitudes don't line up and stuff like that. So we were talking with them, and then Karina, the woman from Miami, suggested that maybe when we get to Agarda, we could share a meal. And I think that and this is another one of those things just for people who are out there doing these hikes. Somebody needs to have the courage to go from, hey, we're just like walking next to each other, to, hey, let's have a meal.
Sure.
And so we stopped at a little seaside restaurant in Agarda. We ordered a meal. We exchanged WhatsApp contact info, and we hiked with these two for basically the rest of our journey. And I would say that meeting them and kind of getting to experience the Camino with other people, because at that point we were 3-4 weeks in. Like yes. we had spent a lot of time, just the three of us, and so it was just awesome to be able to talk to some other people. My wife got along really well we all got along well together. There was a connection between my wife and the lady from Munich, and overall it was just great. They were also booking through a service, so they had predetermined itineraries. They had 0 days planned in different spots, but we through WhatsApp were able to kind of coordinate when we would all be back into the same town. Wow, so we had some lunches together, nice, we had some dinners together. They finished a day before we did, and then they waited for us at a cafe on the day that we came into town and kind of cheered for us when we arrived. But I think that was just that's going to be one of my long lasting memories. And one of the things I'm most thankful for out of the whole Camino experience was the fact that even though we did the booking thing, where we were booking ahead and not staying in albergues, because if you stay in an albergue, you're going to start to develop those relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that just happens organically. If you're not doing that though, I'm just really thankful that we were able to get that part of the experience, because I feel like I would have missed out on that if I didn't get to do that.
It's funny, actually. I feel that those things happen automatically when I did the AT. You just get to talk to people because you have this common point of interest. You're trying to get to a goal, and everybody wants you to succeed. There's almost as much as they want themselves to succeed. So having that commonality of interest is such an important thing to get people talking to each other and share and breaking bread together. So, I appreciate you coming back on and telling us that, because I hadn't gathered that. I'd gathered from our conversation before that you actually had spent a lot of the time just as the three of you as a family, and that would have been missing out some of the community. So I'm glad you got the community you wanted. Okay?
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers. Nice bloke. Meeting him on the trail in 2019 when he brought me the kilt was a touching moment for me. He'd made it, and he'd made the effort to deliver it to me. We had a couple of beers that evening at an awesome brewery, which, if I recall correctly, had an amazing view from really high up. I think it was somewhere near Bear's Den. I think also that Frank clarified what I want to do with my Portuguese Camino with Dana. We're definitely going to start in Porto, take hopefully 14 or 15 days, then leave time to spend several days in Porto to recovery. I'm really looking forward to it. So there we are. Thanks for indulging me in celebrating my 5th Camino anniversary. It was a special time, and I highly recommend it to anyone. I'll see you next week.